1, 2, 3, testing. Thank you. A big thank you to Cambridge Associates, Christine Thurston, and also to Mines and Nancy for that great journey and insight into the decision-making process and the impact journey. So, we're continuing with our program. This is not a networking break. I would ask everyone to take their seats. Thank you. Continuing on the theme of millennials and decision-making and women in health transplant, it's my great pleasure to introduce to you my now friend, Randy Kaufman. She is a partner at EMM, and I have to tell you that EMM is a 100-year wealth advisory firm based in New York. I have had the pleasure to attend many meetings that they host for their clients and other wealth advisors. And Randy, I would call her more as impact mole in this very traditional white glove wealth management firm. Her specialty has been in behavioral finance, and that has really highlighted cognitive dissonance amongst her clients in their decision making around investments and philanthropy. And so we're really delighted to have you, Randy, give us a little flavor of what that means.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm not good at standing still, as many people know. So first of all, before we go into the formal part of the talk, which was the assignment to analyze decision-making across gender and generations, I thought I'd give you a little bit of why I'm here today, and my personal journey towards impact, and then my ability to nudge, cajole, beg, plead with my various clients. Started in 2002, when a very dear friend gave me a book called Fooled by Randomness. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend that as soon as this conference is over, you one-click it and you get that book. That book started me down a journey of behavioral finance, as Jody said. And behavioral finance is the study of why seemingly very intelligent people make decisions that seem irrational all the time. It opened my eyes. I majored in economics in Middlebury in the mid-'80s, and none of it really made sense. And I kept looking for that rational man, and it was always a man, never a woman, that existed. And I then learned by reading that book and about 50 others, the rational man does indeed exist in professors' minds, in their little classrooms, in their ivory towers, but really nowhere along the streets of any town you're going to be walking in. And that's because we all have reptilian brains. Now, it sounds like a bad thing, it sounds like a criticism. It's really not. You realize that if it weren't for those reptilian brains, nobody would be here today, because we would have died in the plains of Africa, eaten by the rhinoceroses. So those brains enabled us to survive. They're uniquely unsuited for a modern world, and that's a whole nother talk that I'd be delighted to give at another time. But when it opened my eyes to behavioral finance, and I was still newly minted in wealth management, clients would come into my office and they'd spend 2 or 3 or 4 hours, what I call perseverating over their investment portfolio. Now that is our day job, is to build good investment portfolios. So why was this active manager 30 basis points below some index? And why was this hedge fund 75 basis points below some index? And I'm sitting saying, why does some index actually matter? That's a whole nother conversation. But that was fine, that was our job. And then they'd walk out of my office, which was then in Boston, and call me up and say, send $1 million here and send $5 million there. And I'm talking about 5 and 10% of their portfolio. And I love philanthropy. But I'd stop and say, awesome, why this organization? And I'd get stories like, well, I read about a starving child in Nairobi, and this hospital on the near north side did a great job with my back surgery. And that's when my hair really curled. And I was like, what are you talking about? Have you even done the analysis you would do if you were buying a new car? And typically, as most of you know, the answer is no. So then in 2007, another dear friend right there, Mr. Glenn McDonald, also changed my life because he invited me to a conference in Palm Beach, and it was the first time I heard the term impact philanthropy. And I realized that there were many, many people out there who could bring the same strategy and discipline and rigor to their philanthropic giving as they would to their investing. And all of a sudden I thought, oh my God, this really makes sense. And I became enamored with impact philanthropy, because in my mind there was nothing more irrational than caring so much about your investments and then just granting money away and not understanding if it was really doing any good at all. And frankly, as all of you know, sometimes it does some real harm in the world. But I was wrong, and those of you who know me well know I hate being wrong. But in 2009, and it was a young millennial, by the way, who picked up the phone. I've always loved working with my clients' kids as a woman who doesn't have kids, because then I could send them back away. But this 20-year-old who was working on an organic farm who went to Middlebury picked up the phone and said, I want something called SRI investing. And I'm like, what? So I started doing the research, and I started really forcing my investment team to look at it. And then I realized I was wrong about my first statement, because there was nothing more irrational than people who care about certain causes, who care about the climate, who care about poverty alleviation, social injustice, and you are ignoring the 95% of their portfolio, the foundation that's sitting there having an impact, good or bad, just choosing not to really understand that. And that's what really sort of brought me full circle. And then it all finally made sense. To me, that was the biggest cognitive dissonance I've ever seen. So that brought me along the journey. And now I'm actually proud to say, having been in this journey for, 2009, so it was almost really 10 years, I do believe finally the force is with all of us. I think finally impact investing is starting to go mainstream. And I do think the day is in sight where we'll no longer be having the conversations about impact investing and what does it really mean. So let me give you a quote that I think will resonate. Take, for example, in the internet sector in the late 1990s, which was viewed by many as a niche sector disconnected from traditional industries. This technology has become utterly integral to every corner of every sector. How many of you could live without your cell phones? Like for 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 3 minutes? We carry supercomputers in our pockets every day, and we don't even understand that. It's become integral to every corner of every sector, fast-tracked human development, and changed the way we communicate, live, problem solve, and conduct business. Impact is similarly becoming an integral consideration to every facet of our personal and professional lives, says Rod Schwartz, CEO of Clearly So. So now to the what I was actually asked to do at this talk, which is to talk about decision-making among gender and generations. First, a couple of insights about millennials. As Sandra said, and a lot of our research, I completely agree with everything that she said earlier, millennials are the largest cohort of the US population. They are an extraordinarily misunderstood generation. And the adjectives one continues to hear about millennials: selfish, self-centered, lazy, materialistic, overly ambitious, etc. Well, I think all of you in this room know, and as I certainly believe, and as I tweet frequently, not my millennials. My millennials are the ones that I've been working with probably now for 5 or 10 years. They are prudent, they're smart, they're wise, they're often on the forefront of impact investing. My millennials are that young girl who lived on the organic farm who called me and was smarter than I was at the age of 20 and said, I keep hearing there's something out there called impact investing. What is it? And she taught me more than I ever taught her. The research says that millennials, contrary to popular belief, are fiscally conservative. They're afraid of the stock market, interestingly enough. They believe that it's sort of gambling. They are extraordinarily uncomfortable with debt. They're much more cautious than their boomer parents, especially when investing in the stock market. They have a great down-to-earth attitude. Now, if you think about when they grew up and their worldview, it wasn't really the easiest journey for them. So a lot of millennials, their first impression of the stock market is, the late 90s years, early part of this decade, when their tech stocks went down by 80% and some 100%. So that doesn't really make you want to trust the stock market. Then we had 9/11, and then we had the most recent the Great Recession, which is still near and dear to many people's hearts and minds. So growing up in that attitude or in that world, I don't think it's a surprise that they're really much more conservative than people give them credit for. Millennials, by the way, are really not living in a material world. I think that's more the boomers, and I'm not going to speak for myself. But millennials, all the studies show, want to spend money on experiences, not on things. And millennials are the ones, I believe, who have really created what I call the renter economy. So you start with Uber, and hopefully, many of us have deleted the Uber app from our phones, and you talk about an anti-impact investment. But be it Juno or Lyft or Via, that is really, why should I have a car? I can have an app. Why should I have a chauffeur? Even if I can afford one, I can have an app. Why should I own music? I can Spotify my music and download whatever I need. Books, I can Kindle my books. The millennials that I know in New York City think those of us who believe that the only way to create wealth in New York is to buy and own an apartment, they think that's sort of crazy. I don't necessarily disagree with them. It's truly a renter's mindset. And many of my millennial friends are extraordinarily proud about the fact they can put all of their worldly possessions in one little backpack and go trekking around the world and be done with it. So the millennials that I've been working with for so long now really want to embrace impact investing, and they do. There's an intense motivation to make the world a better place. They're more interested in socially responsible and ESG investing than any other age group in the country at the time. And it's so interesting. When I pull them back, you'll see I like asking the question why a lot, and say why. And they look at me like I'm sort of an idiot. It's like, what do you mean why? Why wouldn't I want to make the world a better place? And if I can do that and have positive financial returns, so much the better. Millennials believe that the number one priority of businesses should be making the world a better place, helping the environment, helping social justice, whatever it is. And in fact, what I've seen, millennials are often at the forefront of teaching their parents about impact investing. I've had a couple of wonderful foundation meetings, and it's the millennials who are saying, no, Mom and Dad, we really want to do this. And I'm saying, why don't you try it? And they're also teaching their advisors. And shame on the advisors who no longer believe that impact investing makes sense. Turning to women, by the way, another very important phenomenon in impact investing, 60% of wealth in our country is in the hands of women. Women control half of the estates over $5 million. Women stand to inherit 70% of the $41 trillion. I can't fathom what $1 trillion is. I certainly can't fathom what $41 trillion is. It's just an incredible amount of money, and women are going to inherit that for a variety of reasons. It is the largest intergenerational wealth transfer that this world is ever going to see. With this wealth transfer, gender equality will take on a profound and new meaning. It will be a staggering change, and I do think the word staggering is overused, but in this case I think it's fair. And I think it's going to reverberate and transform the financial services industry. That is in part because the Mars and Venus, some people think it's a myth, some people think it's a reality. I actually do believe that it's a reality, that men and women are very different, that we all have advantages and disadvantages. But in my lab, which is really my office, I've seen women think very differently and act very differently, especially when it comes to money. Now, interestingly enough, studies show that women are better investors. We have less testosterone, we trade less frequently. Every study says that high trading between taxes and fees hurts your investment returns. So that's really not that hard to posit, I don't believe. Women tend to be less confident in their investing, even though in the long term they are better investors. And if you ask women, which I always do, what does this money mean for you? Why are you investing? Why have you hired a wealth advisory firm to help you invest? One thing I have never, ever, ever heard from a woman, and don't believe I ever will, is I want to be richer than my brother-in-law. I want to beat the S&P. I want to beat the hedge fund index. I want to die with, $100 million. It's just not how women think. What do you hear? Well, first you hear silence, and then they typically give you an answer that is quite similar to the millennial answer, which is, wow, first of all, I want to have enough, which is a great concept, another TED Talk. I want to have enough to help my nonprofit in Cambodia. I want to have enough to educate my children, to take my grandchildren on a trip around the world. I want to have enough to live the life that I want to live. And it is a very different way about thinking about money. Now, studies also show that, of course, money doesn't buy happiness, as all the wealth advisors in the room know very, very well. But it does buy the ability to have experiences, and people who live those kinds of experiences tend to be happier. So it is women, I believe, who really are driving this march towards impact investing and towards aligning your values and your portfolio. There remains, however, a gap between the passion of impact investing and the how. And a shout out to my dear friends at Big Behalf, because 10 years ago, they embarked on their own journey, and their journey, I believe, was to fill the gap of the how. So lots of people can be passionate, and they are too, but until the wealth advisors and the other impact investors had the tools, had the strategies, the funds to fill that gap of the how, it was really more talk than action. But finally, I believe we are making this happen. So I am really optimistic. And 5 years ago, I would have said cautiously optimistic. But today, I am really optimistic for the first time in my life that we're going to be able to fill that gap. Given the current political environment, and that's all I'm going to say about it, I do believe that the silver lining of the current political environment is there's a renewed sense of urgency when it comes to impact investing, importance, and people in this room gathering who are understanding that now more than ever, we need to talk to their advisors, we need to talk to their parents, we need to insist on aligning our portfolio with our goals. And I think that if we do that, the time will come where we won't even need impact investing conferences. We will understand all portfolios have an impact. They're good and they're bad, and you can choose it, but to ignore it really is foolish. Now, Sean in particular is sitting there saying, get her off the stage. I want to have this impact investing conference and in Nantucket every year. And I will tell you, I want to be here, but there will be a conference, there will be Nantucket, there will be Big Path. I just really hope that the talk won't be around this small group who gets impact investing. The talk will be to a larger community, and the talk will be about great investing practices, big and small. So thank you for your time. There's a bibliography. I want to give a shout out to my millennial helper in the room who is invaluable, who helped me with a lot of the research. Her name is Sophie Forrest. She's interning for Big Path, and she has left the bibliography, which was really her great research, on your tables in case you want to learn more.
Thank you, Randy. And I'm still going to have the conference even if that happens.
I know.
We're going to roll right into the next